Hello and welcome to Operation F&B. My name's Justin Green. I'm your host, and thank you so much for joining me for episode 1 of this brand new podcast. For those of you who haven't had a chance to listen to the promo, Operation F&B is a weekly podcast. Some of the topics we'll cover are operational best practices, new technology that just might make our lives a little bit easier. We will tell and hear stories from the business. You will hear from operators, servers, bartenders, and owners. We will hear the good and the bad. One thing I can promise is that you will walk away with a little more knowledge than you had before, and we'll do it in a really entertaining way. So let's start off by talking about a little current events and news that has come up within our industry. Obviously, we're all dealing with a lot of the same things right now. Something that I came across just this morning was really interesting. There was a Twitter post from Chicago Pizza Boss, which is a food truck in Chicago, and they posted a Grubhub deposit statement from March. And they had 46 prepaid orders for about $1,000. And by the time all of the processing fees and everything that Grubhub took out of it, they were left with $376.54. Now, that is prior to cost of goods, that is prior to labor, that's prior to the gas and everything they need for their food truck. I'm not here to try to demonize any business for creating a business model that people are using. But if they don't make some changes for us so that we can afford to continue to use them, we're going to have to be forced to find ways to do it on our own, because in this world where delivery and to-go and curbside pickup is so important, we need their services, we need their help, because they are the technology experts. They need to think about the industry that they're servicing, how small our margins already are, and then reevaluate their business model to help us help them succeed as well. So next, something else that came across my desk was really interesting. There was a research study done by a company called Blink Research. They surveyed over 300 people in the Metro DC consumer market about restaurant takeout and delivery. Some really interesting stuff came of this. 96% of the people that they spoke to have ordered carryout or delivery at least once in the previous 2 weeks. On average, they had actually ordered 3.65 orders in that 2-week period. And they spent in that 2 weeks about $150, $148.50 over that 2-week period. It's pretty impressive. Now, the next thing that they learned was that people's thoughts of restaurants are changing and what they view them as are changing. So 56% of the respondents that they spoke to were interested in local restaurants offering meal kits, ready to cook, but with all of the ingredients, ready to go for their favorite items. Next, 70% of the respondents have started looking at restaurants and would like to use them instead of grocery stores to get great cuts of meat, fish, all those different types of items that they know that the restaurants get. So while we're going through this change and while we're going through this new world in this COVID-19 pandemic, start thinking outside of the box. How do we start thinking in a way that the people coming into our restaurants and our operations are not the only business lines that we have? Keeping those things in mind, I'm really excited to welcome our guest, chef, owner, multi-year James Beard Award finalist, Justin Carlisle. Thanks for coming on today, Justin.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. How are you doing?
We're holding on. I think as we're all kind of in the same boat, we always want to know what everybody else is going through and doing, but I think it's a mutual agreement that we're kind of all in the same position.
No question. Are you quarantining? Are you out and about? What are you doing?
I think I've worked more since this has happened than before. It's been definitely survival mode. Not too much, I would say. Probably maybe the first week when this initially happened, in the beginning of March, we kind of took the break right away and kind of let everybody stay home and kind of coordinated with team members from home. And Lucy and I, my wife, stayed home and went up to our cottage just to get away from everything. And we really took kind of that first week or a couple days, try to get a really quick game plan. What's the best way to proceed? We were in a somewhat fortunate state at the time that one out of the 3 restaurants, Ardent, was automatically closing down for a scheduled remodel already. And we already had funds there for that and to keep those employees going for at least the next month. And then we obviously used a little bit, what we had to keep the employees at the other restaurants, Red Light Ramen and the Laughing Taco, going for that week for sure, and making sure they knew right away, especially at Taco, we decided obviously our profit margins are a little bit slimmer there. That it would be smarter to, obviously, we know that they have 2 weeks, if not a little bit longer, of payroll to get them in the process right away for the unemployment and get ahead of the game on that, and making sure that anybody that we had to furlough were in the process of doing that early before maybe the surge was coming, in the sense of, because there was a lot of unknown, and I don't think people kind of attacked it as fast as we did in that sense. So we're fortunate to give them to get into a good place where they knew that they had a couple weeks of automatic payroll coming from us and could get into that system and they wouldn't lapse in time. But ever since then, the ramen team, they're outstanding and wonderful, and so grateful for them, decided no matter what, they weren't going to close. They didn't want to close. If they weren't going to get paid, they weren't going to get paid, but they wanted to serve the community and keep on going. And we got fortunate with that. As we went along, we finalized a deal with a local grocery store. So, us, and we have 3 employees, full-time employees at Ramen. We've been going, 7 days a week, 12 to 16 hours a day, just trying to keep up and trying to keep things going for the company.
Man, that's awesome. Really incredible that you've been able to do that. Good planning on your side, obviously, to make sure that your guys are taken care of first. I know that was big as you came into the industry, wanting to make sure that, as an owner, that you were looking out for your guys in maybe a way that you weren't always looked out for as a chef coming up.
100%. It's just, the names of Ardent that goes as true of what the meetings are. And for me, I think there's a lot of us, and it's the way, we respect the relationship that we have with you at the arena and how you treat your employees. We want to work with people those same mindsets. But, I think a lot of us grew up in an industry that we understood how the industry was, and maybe we really entirely didn't agree with it, accepted how we needed to grow up and learn and train. But it was kind of like the kid as they grow up and they wish that, one day if I have, I'm going to do. And it was a lot of that, I want to take care of, it's not me running the restaurants by all means, there's a team of, we have 30 some full-time employees between 3 restaurants, and they're in and day out and keeping the quality there and keeping the customer service there and taking care of the community and taking care of the properties, and doing that. And they deserve more than, myself. I'm fortunate enough to build the walls of the houses with them that houses all of these people in which they have become their homes. And they have to be taken care of. Without them, there is no restaurants, there is no Ardent, Red Light or Taco. You
said something really interesting. I think when you talk to a lot of operators out there right now, they sometimes have negativity towards the workforce that's out there. What did you do to help build your workforce to be so strong and be so loyal to you?
It's been a work in progress. It's been a fluctuation over the years. We didn't have turnover for a long time at some of the restaurants. And then obviously as longevity goes and we can't give as much growth, we turn around and have a lot of turnover, in a short amount of time. And that's kind of the way of the process. But you learn from those processes and you kind of learn, and it's the balancing act of riding the line of maybe you could use another employee or two, but then all of a sudden your hours is going to drop and your payroll is going to drop to be able to share the wealth. Where maybe you talk to a lot of the employees we did when we built the families, we spread out the responsibilities and we gave ownerships and we gave properties within that business that they feel that it is their restaurant, that they are the ones doing this. And we also make sure, me especially, is there is no decisions without us as a team, as a family. There's no decisions where I just come in and make the decision and this is the way it is and this is the only way it's going to be. That doesn't happen in any of our restaurants. And then everything is based off of that. I think we were for sure one of the first ones in the state to stop, and we did that through the way the restaurants were built, where we stopped the front and the split of front and back of the house. And we just hired people, and all they were called, on payroll, where they were called employees. And that was it. There was no breakdown in between that. They were all paid, whether hourly and salary and percentages, and they all got tipped by percentages based off of what their workload was. To me, that was the fairest way that I could do that. If somebody works, 60 hours on another person who works 45 hours, that person that works 60 hours should get more benefits than the person that works 45 hours or 40 hours. And that works. But by all means, it's a never ending work in progress. And there is no right answer to do it other than you have to be a human to a human, and you have to be grateful for what you have, and you have to treat them with respect and do the best you can. It's always a fine line, as Justin, and juggling act, because you're still operating a business. And at the end of the day, yes, it's our responsibility. Yes, we're the ones that open the restaurants, but we're trying, at least for us here, to share that responsibility and that respect as much as we can with everybody here, and not just saying, well, it's my restaurant and you should do this.
I think that we all struggle a little bit with riding that line of making sure that we're being, financially intelligent and making sure that we're taking care of our people. And you've done a really good job. I think you've gone about it a completely different way than some of us have. And I think it's working really well for you, something that we can all learn from. You clearly have, and you talk a lot about how you came up, whether it be as a chef, how you came up, or whether it was on the farm that you grew up on with your family. You really had a lot to do every day on that farm, and you grew your beef, which I think is really cool, and you use that in your restaurants. And I know that your others are using that as well, and you're able to sell that to others. Talk to me a little bit about how important it is to use quality products like the beef that you're using, and do you think that's going to stop you from being affected from some of the shortages that we see coming down the line as meat is being impacted pretty substantially?
Reality, and maybe on a personal standpoint, and I guess time will tell on this, but I think that we're going to be affected less by this because we're going directly to the source. We're going, I'm extremely fortunate on growing up on the beef farm with my parents, and extremely fortunate on the way that my parents raised me in that rural setting of work ethics and kind of understanding where things come from and the evolution of life. And, don't name the animal because the animal is not your pet. It's there for a reason. And this is kind of the circle of life that we go about it. And then moving from that standpoint into obviously the restaurant standpoint, where in theory we become the middleman to the consumer, the diner, the clientele. Fortunately, we'll be more on the fortunate end for the most part. And I would hope that, the years that we've been involved in, especially that you and I've, grown older and been into management and establishing things of having the farm to table, that's going to the source, and having these farmers that are still producing and still growing, as my father is, the animals aren't stunting in growth during this time period, that we can go and use that and use systems or, processes, whether it's going to be, meals for communities or meals for schools, or doing it just directly through, the process that we're doing where we get it in. And now we can, in theory, become somewhat, of a small grocery, of a sense of the excess of what we had, and be able to retail and sell that to the customers that are also coming in right now and buying our meal kits, or that hopefully will be coming back into our dining room. But maybe learning from these processes instead of being scared and being frightened about these processes that are happening right now, that maybe we understand that the systems that we had weren't the strongest systems that we thought that they were, and the channels weren't the strongest that they were, and venturing out and making those relationships in your own system or ecosystem that you can do for your own property, and realizing that instead of, having the bulk meat distributor that we have, maybe there's this farm works for me and I'm only going to deal with this farm. And now if everybody starts allocating on a smaller level independently, these systems will grow organically and stronger, instead of kind of hoping, or as we've always done in the past, having these large places that we pick up the phone and do the order and it shows up the next day.
Do you have those relationships outside of your farm? Do you have those relationships with produce and other stuff that you're bringing in?
We do. We do have that. And I think, it's still a juggling act through these times on those, whether it's some of the produce farms or the chicken or pork farms that we deal with, because also the reality of what we're in is our sales have fluctuated, man. It's the gambling act of obviously everybody is, on survival necessity mode, and only be able to get what we need to process what we need until we can grow. We're fortunate we have that, but it's still on the learning process of, I wish I could take more or do more. But it's the balancing act of wishing and actually doing on both sides, on my end and on their end.
You mentioned that Ardent, which is your first restaurant, is in the middle of a remodel, and you were able to take advantage of this time. Did it happen a little earlier than you expected based on the quarantine, and you're just taking advantage of that?
The reality is the restaurant will be completely built and brand new by next week. which in theory is a little bit of a delay. Obviously we were fortunate enough that we continued during the time, and the companies that we were working with obviously were able to continue. But as most of us, they had to lay off some people. So a lot of the progress slowed down onto the man load, and obviously the social distancing and how many people, can be in our areas, as and most people that have been, all three of my restaurants are not the largest restaurants you've ever been in. So there's definitely the spacing issue you've gone through, but to be able to continue that, and we were extremely fortunate, and everybody's like, you're lucky that this happened, and we were extremely fortunate what happened. But on the opposite side, we're fortunate that with the people we've worked with on this process, because we have the funds there to do that project, but those funds weren't there to float to restaurants outside of that project for 3 to almost 4 weeks now, until they're starting to gain traction again, to be on survival mode. But we're fortunate that that allotted us at least to respect our decisions. We weren't going to take a lot of the deferments or any of that we were going to continue to pay our vendors. We're going to continue to pay our rent. We're going to continue to pay as much as we possibly can, not to create maybe that future that for me and the managers here, my partners and my wife, were scared of, the unknown of whether we're going to get funding or not. We are secured to supposedly get some of that, but obviously I haven't seen it, and I don't believe it until I see it. But be able to, if we come out of this, and sure, we might be extremely broke and everything else, and so everybody else in the world, but then there isn't this pile of financial debt that we created during this time down there. At least we can be leveled out. And, in all honesty, if we can't make it after that, then we can kind of walk away at a better state than if we couldn't make it. And now all of a sudden we've stockpiled this increasing amount of debt to people when we're done with it too, and we don't want to be in those burdens of owing people money because they're in the same state that we are.
Yeah, you don't want to have that hole to climb out of at the end, and I think that's you guys have set yourself up by not being some gigantic behemoth of a restaurant that has unbelievable. Not that you don't have bills to pay, just like any place else, but I think the way you've set yourself up is so smart.
Well, it was, and it was always kind of, I remember, we're going on 7 years since we opened up, and of course, 7 years ago, and for most of our lives here, we've always had the question of, well, are you going to expand? Are you going to grow? How can you make it in these small little spaces? How can you make it doing this? And it was always the thought process of that we never did this to be rich. We did this to hopefully give a good livelihood to the staff and to have a good livelihood and be able to do what we want to do. And in all honesty, we obviously nobody ever planned for this, but in the bad times we can survive, and in the good times we can do a little bit better. And that is at least shown, at least true at this aspect, that we can slowly kind of limp along, but yet when we come back out of this, hopefully we can continue and grow back, be in a better place a little bit quicker than, yes, if we were twice the size.
To your point, I think the pandemic obviously is affecting every size business right now, and every type of business. The food and beverage industry was one of the first to really be affected based on some of the shutdowns and the rules that happened. What are you doing differently right now with your business to get through this time? Obviously, you've got some to-go and things like that, but you mentioned your ramen packets that you're doing for the grocer. Tell us a little bit about that, and are you doing other things to get by as well?
A lot of this, and for the last, and I think a lot of us in the restaurant business, at least maybe for us, maybe the last 2 years, just there's a lot more openings. There's a lot more things happening in the world. Obviously, the changes in our industry, and they're all good changes in that sense of paying employees more and drawing attentions to things that maybe were not wonderful that were happening in our industry for over the decades and times, and changing that and obviously evolving that and learning how to do that has helped us. I think for me and the teams that we've had here, we have tried to look at going into retail. We've tried to look at making more partnerships, obviously, like we've done with your company, and things that are on a smaller scale that obviously lets us broaden our community and broaden what we do, but gives us a little more security outside of our storefronts. But it really, ramen was the ones that we really built on that, where we, starting last fall, about October, started kind of the discussions and the talks with Metcalf's Market, the grocery store. For us, we wanted to obviously broaden ramen. We've been extremely fortunate. There's been, a demand for it, and it's done very well. And we have a small space. So how could we do that without opening other locations, without going through these processes of brick and mortars? For us, it was trying to get out to communities not closer to us. So whether it's the outside of Milwaukee, like, Wauwatosa, and going into the Madison market, but then that won't affect us downtown where our, home is and our storefront is. And we can kind of broaden our name and our brand in that sense. And we're extremely fortunate enough that we got to finalize that deal within the last couple of weeks, and we started it a week ago today. But I think for a lot of, at least for us, is those are the thoughts, trying to make more partnerships and more relationships in that size where, we kind of all share, the wealth on top of the burden and on top of the fear of doing these things in the hospitality business. But it's kind of a better and more secure process, I think, in our industry than all of us going our own independent way and going into our own storefronts, where we can just be partners and kind of share everything and do everything at a smaller scale and grow ourselves a little bit slower, but a little more secure, and hopefully it'd be secure for those businesses and the people that work in those businesses.
You talk a lot about relationships and building those, and we're in an industry where people are not always as cautious with relationships as you have been and as you talk about. And I'm sure you've learned over your career, sometimes we burn bridges and we walk away, and we, even as chefs or managers or owners, in this industry, it's easy to do sometimes. How important is it to you to make sure that you continue to build really strong relationships and don't burn bridges as you grow?
I think that's one of the most important things. And we've all burned those bridges. We've all had those moments of blowups. We've all had those mistakes that we've made in life and things that we shouldn't have done and things that we didn't think would affect people, and they've affected people. You learn from them. You learn from all of those as you grow. A lot of people have always talked, put it behind you and move on and do a lot of things. There's been a lot of me personally that I don't want to completely put them all behind me, because I want them to be there and to learn from them, to have them still a little relevant in my life, that I remember that there's situations that all of a sudden what comes about, and be able to handle these situations better than maybe we would have in the past. To me, there's no more important things, especially this day and age, than grooming those relationships and holding on to those relationships. I've been fortunate enough of, events and travelings and things that I've done, that there is always a helping hand by people, especially in times when you may never know it. And our industry is smaller than the world might think it is. And those relationships someday will help out. And you're always there to help somebody in need, and that someday they're going to help you out.
Do you think that we get back to normal operations as we know it after the pandemic?
I don't think we'll ever get back to normal operation as we know it. Personally, for me, I don't think our industry and our business will never, ever be the same again, in my personal opinion. I think, we're going to have obviously the time period of, we're going to grow and we're going to be able to open up our dining rooms at certain stages and certain restrictions. For us personally, we aren't going to open our dining rooms until we know it's completely safe, until we know that our staff is safe, our diners are safe, our community is safe, is to be within our businesses. And obviously us on the smaller size of the restaurants, it's close quarters, and I don't want to put anybody in harm's way. Hopefully there's going to be more attention to our industry that there should have been. Maybe that through this unfortunate economic times, that maybe they realize that we are more valuable to this country than maybe people thought we were, instead of just a kind of a luxury and commodity that people thought that we were in neighborhoods and businesses, and what kind of support and structure we've actually held up in communities and states and businesses, and kind of see that we get the respect that we have. But I don't think there's going to be a norm, and I think there's going to be a lot of ups and downs and trial periods on figuring out what the future holds for us, and I think I hope, in the sense of these times, people kind of look at, this business that they kind of took for granted and always asked for lack of better words, that handout or that gift certificate, or come and do a charity event for me. Or can you give this for charity, that maybe those companies that are a little more fortunate than us in these time periods kind of turn around and give that charity back, and give those assistances back to to the restaurant community and to the food and beverage community that is always here. And you can see us, here in the community that are giving away meals for free and still doing things for free, even though, we're in disaster mode. But yet we still have people showing up, wanting to give back and support and keep our community going.
That's a good way to bring this to a close, Justin. I really appreciate you coming on today. Be sure to follow Justin on Twitter. He is at JK Carlisle. He's got 3 incredible restaurants. He's got Ardent, Laughing Taco, and Red Light Ramen. Be sure to check those out online as well. Justin, really appreciate your time.
I appreciate it. Take care. Be safe, Justin. I'll see you soon.
Well, I hope everybody enjoyed episode 1. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you have any great ideas or want to talk to me about the show, reach out at operationfnb.com and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast service to Operation F&B. Talk to you soon.